So I will now leave the floor to my colleagues. Maud? Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that you can hear me clearly now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, Maud.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Everybody is welcome to this important awareness raising program on humanitarian action organized by International Disability Alliance under the DRG group, which is Disability Reference Group on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action. We are organizing this workshop as part of series of workshops that are organized around the world, including in the Asia Pacific, in the Americas, and in other parts of the world. So organizing this workshop in the African region is part of our program as International Disability Alliance and members of Disability Reference Group to create awareness and ensure participation of organizations of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action with other partners, and ensuring that organizations of persons with disabilities play critical role in humanitarian response. This is due to the fact that we have seen that most organizations of persons with disabilities rarely engage in humanitarian action. So as we start our program, my name is Maud Luis. I am the Disability Reference Group Fellow, or the DRG Fellow for the African region. I would like to warmly and kindly and with all kinds of humility welcome each and every one of you for this important workshop. And I hope that each and every one of you will know each other. Of course, we have basic rules that we need to take into consideration, that each and every one of you is given an opportunity to speak. Please ask for permission. If you cannot, then you can put your camera on. We will give you a chance to listen to you. Of course, I'll go back to Stacy, and I will also wish to welcome each and every one of you to introduce him or herself before I can proceed with the other part and introduce the objectives of the program. So you're highly welcome, Stacy.
Thank you, Maud. While we wait for Shitaye, does Cathy, Christelle, Suleiman, Gordon would like to take the floor? Thank you.
Then can I proceed with the objectives in the meantime as we wait, or the rest can take the floor? Because if we wait, then I don't know whether we have to start with the objectives first, and then once our guest joins, then we can proceed.
I think it's okay for you to continue with the objectives for now, and that's a good idea, Maud. And then we can do introductions once Shitaye is here.
Yes, actually, our workshop is mainly intended to build the capacities of organizations of persons with disabilities by introducing them to humanitarian action. And that is by basically ensuring that organizations of persons with disabilities are able to participate effectively in the humanitarian response program. So here we have the session outline in the program. Actually, when we look at our agenda, we have the welcoming and opening remarks by the regional OPD representative, which is for this particular program is African Disability Forum, whom we are waiting for. Then after that, we will have welcome and introduction and clarifying the session's objectives and expectations, which will be done by the DRG fellow.
Moot, we've just lost your connection. We just lost your connection, Moot. So I'll step in for a little moment. So Moot, I think if you could stop for a moment because we can't hear you. Yeah, I think we just lost Moot there. So I'll just continue a little bit until we get Moot back.
Guidelines. Yes.
Okay, Moot, we got you back now. We lost your connection. Welcome back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So we just lost you when you were starting to talk about the discussion of types of crisis.
Okay. Let me go. Here, actually, we looked at the types of crisis. We will look at that. And then also after looking at the types of, we'll look at the policies. Let me go back. Yes, we will look at discussions on types of crisis, looking at group work. This will be through group types of various disabilities. After that, we will go to introduction on instruments and policies relevant to different types of crisis, both at the international level and the regional level. So this is something to look at. After that, we will have a sensory break for each and every one of you. If you wish to go and take some water, you want to check something on the internet, if you want to learn some new information and get some more understanding and refresh your mind. So this is also a sensory break for every one of you. Also, we will have a brief introduction on IAC guideline, which is Interagency Standing Committee Guideline on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action. And with this, will also be accompanied with group work by all participants. As you know, we will also look at this part because OPDs have critical role to play in this. So note this as we also progress in our program, plus the other things that. Now, we will after that come to final reflections and questions and answers. So in the final reflections, we will give you the remarks of this training and what we have discussed. And after that, we will follow by, after that, final reflections and questions and answers. And after that, homework. And after that, we will go to close of sessions and we will give you a feedback poll where we'll also express your opinion, and you will also let us know about your knowledge on humanitarian action, your prior knowledge and your current knowledge. So we'll also have an assessment.
Sorry, Moot. I think your audio has gone again. We're gonna turn off the cameras for bandwidth apart from the interpreters. That might help. Moot, let's try one more time. So I think, Stacey, we have to send a message to Moot that we can't hear him. And if you could just mute Moot, and then we'll move on. I think there's a lot of internet connections problems today because I think Shataya was wanting to warmly welcome everyone from the African Disability Forum, and she's also not been able to make it. But Stacey, can you just give us a heads up if we've got more people trying to get in?
Hi everyone. So we have Shitaya Stawes with us, representing the African Disability Forum, and who will be available to provide some opening remarks. Shitaya, your microphone is muted. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You hear me?
We can hear you really well. Yes, thank you, Shatai.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Great. My name is Shatai Stawas. I'm based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I'm working for the African Disability Forum, ADF, which is a regional umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities, or national umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities across African region. I am the director for advocacy and communication, and I am happy and honored to be here today with you to just say few words about this meeting, this webinar. It's humanitarian action, and making humanitarian action inclusive is very much important, and among one of our priorities as ADF. And I would like to take this moment to thank you all for the organization of this very important sensitization webinar on the issue. And it's high time with the global impact of COVID and the economic crisis across the globe. This agenda is now very much crucial for all of us, and it's high time to think of supporting, motivating, and making a reality the inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian actions. This is also about Article 11 of the UNCRPD, and persons with disabilities are always or often marginalized from such actions. Organizations and institutions on the field think to sideline or leave the issue that concerns persons with disabilities to those specialized organizations and NGOs. Why being included in humanitarian action is a right for all persons with disabilities as per the United Nations Convention on the right of persons with disabilities. Saying this and wishing a successful derivation on this webinar. I leave you here, and thank you again for the ample chance. Thank you, and good luck with the webinar.
Thank you, Shataya, for welcoming us, and thank you for all the ADF support. And we know the follow-up support that you will give to link OPDs in the region following this as well. Thank you. So Maud, I'm not sure if your audio is working, but I'm just going to go ahead quickly and ask people just to give a little sense of who they are. If they'd like to put their microphone on, say hello, and give us a little bit of background. For the facilitators, we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves as well. So I'm Kathy Al-Jorbe, and I'm here to support from TBM Global. I'm the DRG co-lead with Al-Radi Abdullah. And we support the outreach to OPDs to get involved in humanitarian action. So while we're doing introductions, I'm going to pass over to my colleagues to introduce themselves, to Suleiman and Crystal and Gordon. And if Mood has his audio on. And
yes,
we'd love if you would then introduce yourselves, and perhaps just Stacey is going to put a poll asking if you could just stop the presenting, Crystal, the PowerPoint.
Yes, will do.
Stacey's going to share a poll where we'd just like to get a sense of what your background is. And if you've got, it's a very simple poll. If you have had no experience of working in humanitarian action, a little, a lot, or some, or a lot. So that poll will come on soon. And in the meantime, I would invite everyone to introduce themselves. Thank you. Gordon, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to, Kathy, I will jump in and say good afternoon, good morning if anyone is in the morning zone. My name is Gordon Rattray. I work for European Disability Forum, which is the umbrella organization of organizations of persons with disabilities in Europe. I'm based in Brussels in Belgium. And I'm very pleased and honored to be invited today to join and to help in the facilitation of this meeting. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to participating.
Can I jump in now? Suleiman speaking.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Abdul Momoni Uja Suleiman. As you can see, I am a sign language user. Just newly appointed at CBM Global Disability Inclusion as the Disability Inclusion Advisor, Nigeria Country Office. My work is more focused on disability advocacy, and I've been closely working with OPDs in different aspects. And I also have strong skills in the humanitarian sector, especially in the UNCRPD Article 11, and also a bridge alumni of the Module 1, 2, and 3. I'm also here as a co-facilitator. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is myself, Maud Luis. I have introduced myself much earlier. My name is Maud Luis from South Sudan. I work as a fellow, and I'm working for International Disability Alliance as a DRG fellow. And I have been actually working in the field of disability for OPDs, and also now working for other humanitarian actors. And currently I'm working for International Disability Alliance. And thank you.
I think I am the last co-facilitator to present myself. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Very happy to be here. My name is Crystal Joylo. I work as the Disability Inclusion Officer with UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. We have a regional office covering Eastern and Southern African countries. We are based in Nairobi in Kenya. So my background is actually in human rights and humanitarian law. So I'm very happy to do the the session on the international frameworks for you, that I hope will not be too boring. Thank you.
Great. And can we hear a little bit from participants? Like, thank you for those that are doing the poll. So some of you are answering. We'd love to hear more, have more answers. So the question is, how much experience do you have in working with humanitarian actors in humanitarian action? And don't worry if it's none and this is your first time. That's great. That means this is the right meeting for you, because we're aiming to introduce people that maybe heard a little bit about humanitarian action or would like to get involved, but haven't had the opportunity before. So please, can you just give us a sense of if you could answer the poll, and please either put your mic on to say hello or use the chat box, whichever you prefer. But we'd like to know who everyone is and which organization you're from. I'm going to risk putting on my camera again, but if the internet goes poorly, I'll put my camera off. So maybe John, would you like to introduce yourself? Or Godfrey, please feel free to introduce yourself, or just put a message in the chat box which organization you're from, and we'd be happy to read it out.
Hello, I'm working for African Disability Program, South Sudan. And I've been working in different humanitarian organizations, 13 years on ranging from CBR programs to rehabilitation to disability mainstreaming on humanitarian response. And currently I'm working as a ADF in South Sudan, supporting OPDs, the National Federation for South Sudan in South Sudan. Thank you. I'm having also beside me.
Yes, hello, my name is Nema Juma. I'm the Communications and Advocacy Office of Light for the World, South Sudan. And I'm really glad to be part of this meeting. Thank you.
Great, nice to have you both. Even if you're on one place, it's great to have you both. Welcome. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves, either in person or on screen? Yes, Godfrey?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Godfrey Bambale. I am based in Uganda, Africa. I work with a Karambe group of persons with disabilities. It is an organization of persons with disabilities. And we are currently implementing a project on DIDRR, the Disability Inclusive Disaster Risk and Response Project. It's going to be implemented in Kasese district. That is one of the districts in Uganda. And it is going to run for 34 months. I'm happy to be here today. Thanks for inviting me, and I hope the knowledge I'll get here will help us to implement better this project that we are currently implementing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Godfrey. I'd like to invite anyone else that would like to say hello. I know some people are shy and they prefer to use the captioning, the chat box. So feel free to use the chat box to introduce, or if you'd like to put your camera on and say hello, it would be lovely.
Yes, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Ishia Kwademu from Nigeria Association of the Blind. I'm here in Nigeria. I'm happy to be here and also to learn from this great initiative of IDA and other partners. Thank you.
I'm just sharing the results of the poll. I'm hoping that you can everyone see the results of the poll? I'm happy to read through. So we've got a mixture of people. We've got 40% it's the first time, 20% it's a little, 20% some, and 20% a lot. So that's great to know that we've got mostly people that saying it's the first time, or they have a little experience, because that's exactly who we're targeting. So don't worry about that. We have 2 sessions together. We'll be sharing resources. We shared some resources before the session. We'll be sharing more resources between the sessions. And at the very end, we'll also give you, signpost you to further training and resources to continue the journey with us. So we're hoping that these 2 sessions will give you an opportunity to make an informed choice about if you would like to get engaged in humanitarian action, and if so, how you can get engaged. That's the main objective. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Suleiman and ask Crystal if she could just show that part of the PowerPoint to support. Thank you. And as we said, sorry, just before I do that, just to say, please don't be shy about asking any questions. There's nothing, this is a safe space. If you don't understand or something's not clear, it's there's no judgment. We're doing these sessions directly to give you a space that's able, that you can ask anything. So please don't be shy. So with that, I pass over to Suleiman. Thank you.
Kathy, just a quick question. Can you see the slideshow, or can you still see the notes?
I can see just the slideshow. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Great. Thanks. Over.
Oh, Jesus. Thank you very much, Crystal. Kathy, sorry. Please, can we move to the slides on hazards?
Yes, we are now on the slide on categories of hazards.
All right, thank you. We need to know the most important areas of different humanitarian issues. And now we have categories of hazards. Number one is the seasonal hazards. Examples are the floods, cyclones, and the drought, which can have a serious risk on the predictable times of the year. Then the second one, we have the evolving hazards, such as the armed conflict, that we have them in the communities, serious human rights violations. It can also be economic hazards and also be pandemics. Those risks are those hazards are those that pose changes irregularly over time. Then the next one, we have the static hazards. One example is the earthquake. Others can be volcanoes and tsunamis, which can pose the same level of risk all the time. The static hazards are very unique in that the time of their occurrence is impossible to predict. Please, the next slide. Please, can we move to the next slide?
Yes, we're now on the slide on impacts of humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, so now we are on the impacts of humanitarian crisis. Displacement. This has a serious impact on the population, and it might be forced to flee their homes. The affected populations might be forced to flee their homes for safety to different areas within the country. And so we know this to be internally displaced people, or it can be across borders to another country, known as refugees. The next one is the destruction of homes and infrastructure. Which affects the populations that may lose their homes and belongings, and key infrastructure, such as water and sanitation, may also be destroyed. Then we have the disruption in social networks. When people are seriously affected and they are displaced and or split by conflict, supportive social networks may be broken down and families, households may be separated because of that disruption in social networks, which can happen within our communities. Please, can we move to the next slide?
Yes, we're on the next slide now.
Thank you. Other impacts of humanitarian crisis, disruption of services, key service systems, including for the health, the educational system, the protection, and others, breakdown, including as staff flee, buildings are destroyed, and other difficulties, which prevents ongoing delivery. Of service, delivery of service. And the next impact of humanitarian crisis is the violence, exploitation, and abuse. There is a heightened risk of violence as systems to protect and support victims break down. For example, the social and service networks, and also support of the victims in the breakdown of any of the social services. The next impact of humanitarian crisis, the loss of livelihoods. Livelihoods could be lost, and affected populations are forced to resort to negative coping mechanisms. The next impact of humanitarian crisis, the divestment of resources. At a national level, resources may be diverted towards immediate response to the crisis which take place. Please, can we move to the next slide?
Yes, we're on the next slide with the group work now.
Perfect, thank you. Please, Stacy, can you please break down the groups into different groups, the participants into different groups? We're supposed to have 5 groups. The participants will figure out which of the barriers are faced by persons with disabilities, and the 3 types, the 3 categories of hazards: the seasonal hazards, the evolving, and the static. The seasonal hazards in drought, cyclones, evolving hazard, which could be armed conflict, and also pandemic. We also have the static hazard, which we could have earthquake under. So under these five hazards, we need to list the type of barriers that persons with disabilities face in those 5 hazards. I hope you're all following.
Hi, Suleiman. Maybe if we just don't show the slide just yet, maybe we could just have a little, could we go back to the hazards? Could we just ask people, if you go back to the slide, one more slide, that's it.
Yeah, that's fine, fantastic.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, Suleiman, if we could just ask people if they have any questions around the way that we've categorized those hazards.
Fantastic.
Yeah, before we go into the group, just let's make sure people are clear, because sometimes people get mixed up. Do people have any questions around the way that we've categorized hazards? And have you got any examples of those types of hazards? Can you think of examples of those types of hazards from your countries, your region, this region in Africa? I think, Godfrey, you've got lots of experience. Maybe could you speak to which type of hazards?
Sorry?
Godfrey, can you give us some examples from the hazards that you've been involved with?
I'm not getting you clear.
So we have 3 types of hazards, and on the screen, it's seasonal hazards, evolving hazards, and static hazards. And this is the kind of terminology that humanitarians use now to describe different types of emergency. And I'm just wondering if it's clear for everyone And if people can give us some examples of the types of hazards that you've been affected by in your context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you so much. Can I jump in now?
Yeah, that would be great.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to speak to you. In my area here, basically what we have been incurring is the floods, the flooding of rivers, and this has actually impacted or has taken a lot of lives of our people, including those with disabilities. And also majorly the landslides is also another hazard that we've been facing here in Kasese. Kasese is a prone disaster area, but majorly the floods, the landslides, and the hailstones, those that came and destroy every crop on the earth, and also the heavy windstorms that blows away the roofs of our houses, and you basically takes even the lives of people. And as I said earlier, that we are implementing a project on the DIDRR issues, and we have been working closely with the district management disaster committee to ensure that when it occurs, people with disabilities are included in the planning, or when it has happened, or even before it has happened, because sometimes people with disabilities are left behind when it comes to disaster times. Even when they're like distributing food, you'll find people with disabilities also lining up on getting food, which is sometimes costly, because someone in a wheelchair or someone is on a walking stick may not be able to stand like for 2 hours waiting for food. So we want to ensure that we talk to the stakeholders to ensure that they include our people in the preparedness, or even after it has happened. So basically, that's what we are doing, and that is the disaster that we are facing here in Kasese in Uganda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Godfrey. And you really spoke to those seasonal hazards that you can, with seasonal hazards, they're predictable. And that's why humanitarians can work well with the DRR networks, the disaster risk reduction networks, that can start helping to prepare, so that when there is a crisis, then you're able to respond and your emergency preparedness is stronger. Thank you for that, Godfrey. Adamu, forgive my pronunciation. Adamu, would you like to go? You've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I think the last speaker was able to talk more on the seasonal, which, as you mentioned, is predictable. So it is easier for humanitarian actors to put a kind of plan to deal with it. So I think from what Suleiman talked, he also talked about the evolving aspect, which is another type of humanitarian crisis. And what I want to share is the one happening in Northeast Nigeria, which involves conflict of insurgency that led to the displacement of over 2 million people in about 6 states, and also it affects some neighboring county like Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. So we can also call that as evolving, because it involves armed conflicts and a lot of bloodshed and things like that, and leads to massive displacement of people across within the country and also across borders. Thank you.
Great. And Meleku has put a great example also in the chat box of a hazard that can be ongoing, the conflict in northern Ethiopia, and also the global COVID-19 pandemic. That was unexpected, and it was an evolving evolving hazard that affected everyone in the world. So I also want to welcome Tingley, Frederica, and Najako. I can see that you're all sharing a link together. So welcome. I don't know if you can if we can hear from you. Are you able to unmute and say hello and make sure we have a good audio connection with you before we do the group work? Who's got the audio link? Because we're about to do group work and Stacey's just preparing that for Suleiman. And we're going to have you in one group together. So lovely if we can know where you're from.
So we're in the northwest with an armed conflict which has been going on now for 6 years, and our economy has been difficult. The other part of Cameroon, the Republic of Cameroon, French speaking, and some children have remained behind. They cannot go to school. They are out of school. They don't have birth certificates. They are suffering. The community schools are not offering the best type of education. And so we are experiencing the impact. The impact is so heavy. Economically, the livelihood of the inhabitants or the remnants who are behind, they cannot survive. They cannot go to farm. They don't have fertilizer to put on their farms for production. So this is Ngogatunja from Northwest region, Cameroon.
Thank you very much. And I think now we're going to ask you to do a group work together. And do we know who's in the room with you? Can you introduce everyone? Can you quickly say hello so we know who else is there?
Yes, I will do. Here is come.
I think if everyone wants to quickly say hello, and then we know how many people are there.
Yes, we have. Give your name. So they come to prison.
Yeah, they can quickly, yes, of course, come to the camera and say hello, and then we know who's there, and that can be one group working. While people are coming over to say hello, Stacey's organizing the group work for us. It's just been muted, we can't hear. Tingley, you've just put the mute on. Can you? Yeah, that's
My name is Tingley Fred Njakoi, Ngogatunja Division.
Fantastic. Welcome, Frederick.
My disability, I'm visually impaired.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
For 19 years now.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yes. I'm
My name
Senga
is Annette Bavidie. I'm from Uganda.
Yes, my disability is my leg. And I'm unable to move.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and also I have the certificate, but poverty cannot let me to further. So that's why we are pleading to you people to assist us.
Hello.
Yes.
Network problem challenges.
So God, if there's also somebody saying hello from the other channel in Uganda, do you want to say hello as well?
Yes. Can I get you?
Yes.
Hello.
the friend in Cameroon, would you like to say hello to the lady in Cameroon?
Hello, good afternoon.
And what's your name?
I'm called Euphemia from Benson. I'm a visual impaired for 9 years. It was my final year to be a grade 1 teacher. Due to this crisis, I was supposed to go and do private. Due to this crisis, there is no means for me to.
Thank you. So we're going to go into group work now. And what's going to happen is Stacey is going to ask all the people in Cameroon to be in one group. So still, could we go to the group work slide now? We've been talking about these different types of hazards, and you've given good examples. And now what we're going to do is we're going to ask people in different groups. I'm going to pass over to Stacey to explain who's in which group, but there's going to be one group in Cameroon. You're going to work together. All the people that are on Tingley Frederick Jacob's link will work together as one group. So Stacey, can I pass to you to explain and who the other groups will be?
Hi everyone, this is Stacey speaking. So I will just mute some of you while I speak, if it's okay with you. Okay, so I just wanted to inform you that we will be splitting everyone in 2 breakout rooms. We will have, just like I would like the facilitators to let me know if it's fine for the participant to take 2 type of crisis per group. And just let me know which one are the key type of crisis that they should be discussing about. And each group will have to design someone to report after and to provide the feedback to the main group. For the people who needs sign language interpretation or captions, please stay in the main room and we'll have a group in the main room. Otherwise, just go into the other breakout room. Is that clear for everyone?
Yeah, can I suggest that we have 3 groups? But the Cameroon group, if they do drought, seasonal hazard drought, okay? And there'll be they're in one group together. So the Tingley Frederick Najako, there are 3 or 4 people there, Stacey. That's one group.
That's your group.
Okay. And you're
Yes.
going to look at seasonal hazard drought. And then in the second group that Stacey's going to do, which is in a different breakout room, you're going to do armed conflict, which is an evolving hazard.
That's the Cameroon group.
The Cameroon group are going to do drought.
Okay.
Drought.
Okay.
And you need to think about what are the barriers facing people with disabilities
in drought.
In the situation of drought.
Okay.
That's for your group. So you've got 10 minutes to think about that now. You can put your camera off and discuss it together and be ready to have one person feedback. What are the barriers facing people with disabilities? And Stacey, if you could break the other 2 groups, one in the main room, and I don't know if we have anybody else that's using sign interpretation. Can we ask?
So for the moment we have Ashura, and I would like to know if anyone else would require captions or sign language interpretation.
So then the group that's in the breakout room should look at armed conflict. And then the group that stay in the actual main room can look at pandemic. Okay? So we're just going to look at 3 hazards: drought, armed conflict, and pandemic. 2, 3, and 4. Is that okay? So Cameroon are going to look at drought. Those that are staying in the main room are going to look at pandemic, and those that go to the breakout room will look at armed conflict. And Stacey's put that in the chat box for everyone. So think about what Suleiman was talking about, the way that hazards evolve, and think about how does that affect, it affects everybody in the community. A humanitarian crisis impacts everybody in the community. But in the group, we want to think particularly what are the additional barriers that face people with disabilities in a crisis. Is that clear?
Yes.
Great. Suleiman, how long do they have? Do they have 10 minutes?
Hello, 10 minutes is okay.
Thank you. Okay, so 10 minutes and then we'll call you back.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, hello, everyone. This is Stacey speaking. Eric, do you require sign language interpretation or captions? Eric, I don't know if you can hear us. Maybe you can write in the chat if needed. Okay, so in this group we have Ashura, Chandiga John, and we will have Eric with us. So this group is discussing about evolving hazard about the pandemic. You have 10 minutes. Eric, can you hear us? John, you would like to take the floor? I think someone has some connection issues. Okay, Godfrey, I will affect you to a room. Please, guys, this is your discussion time. So Ashura, Eric, and Chandiga John, your topic is about evolving hazard pandemic. So if you want to develop around that. Unfortunately, John, we cannot hear you. Your connection seems to be not working. Is it possible that you type in the chat box, maybe? Ashura, you want to take the floor, maybe? I'm sorry, John, I cannot hear you at all. It's not working. Ashura, do you want to take the floor? Or Patrick, maybe? Please don't be shy.
Hello.
Hi,
Is
Patrick.
Yes, I can't take the floor at the moment, but I will come in later.
Thank you, Patrick. Eric, you would like to say something?
I greet you. I'm late. I joined the group.
Okay, so we are having now breakout discussions around like the different type of crisis that you may face, and so it's about evolving hazard about the pandemic. So this is a discussion now that you like. If you could share about the type of crisis about around the pandemic.
Yeah. Then now I have got the link lately. Then I like to know what they will discuss about.
I'm sorry, I could not understand.
Can't understand. I wanted to know what you are then your conversation is about which subject.
And so this is what I was saying. We had discussed about the different type of crisis that you can face in humanitarian action, right? And so there are several, such as drought, such as flood, such as the pandemic, and like armed conflict. And so this group here is supposed to discuss and provide some examples about evolving hazards about the pandemic.
Yeah. Oh. Then see then me, Eric. I'm Burundian. My presentation there first. I'm Burundian. Okay. I work then for the organism which is then the Tabarane. In there then they are we work for the project for children. For the children, they are then who are physically has some problems, and also in Burundi, they are then the law in which then has submit, which then we have to conform, but then there are many persons, even children who are physical, and also many different handicap. Yeah, thanks.
All right, Eric, thank you. So we have Chandiga John saying, in case of hazard like COVID-19, persons with disabilities are more vulnerable in the sense that some need personal support like PA, which become difficult in terms of keeping distance.
You see,
of keeping distance, some may not have access to washing facilities, access to information and resources to buy protection equipment.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to add on that?
Yeah. They have a problem to access to the job, access to the school. They have also to hide some children. They have now to hide. They are also sometimes in families, for example, for men and the woman, they have a problem to do then the marriage with someone who has some handicap.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Let's leave the floor to Mohammed as well. I think he wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank
you. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Even though I joined the session lately because of the technical issue, but
no problem, Mohammed.
If I understand that whenever we are talking of the hazard or involve or disaster to person with disability, either it is man-made or natural, it has a kind of multiply effect to persons with disability. And there is a serious barrier in terms of humanitarian action. If you look at involving hazard, whether it is pandemic, lack of assistive device or access to information to person with disability, or involving person with disability into decision making in terms of most of the stakeholders, they normally used to forget about person with disability. So there is need to implement the guideline of humanitarian guidelines, so that organization of person with disability should have a kind of awareness. Whenever there is disaster, there must be a kind of mitigation measure. I think this will go a long way. If you look at the involvement of hazard, if either it is drought. For instance, now in my country, Nigeria, we have a crisis of the Boko Haram crisis, is also one of the armed conflict. And issues of the drought, many people, they have become displaced, homeless, they don't have house, they have become IDPs. And whenever they came for the assessment, they don't normally use to involve the person with disability because of lack of assistive device and access to the information. I think it is the key. This is what I even want to contribute.
Great. I think you covered like almost all the different topics of the discussion. This is, I mean, normally your group is focusing on the barriers regarding the pandemic specifically, but please feel free to share besides with the other group as well if you want to add more on what they would have discussed. So we have also Ashura saying that persons with disabilities experienced low quality or inaccessible healthcare services than others. So the group discussion will finish very soon. Is there someone who would like to report this feedback to the main group? Can be any one of you, huh? Okay, so we will select someone then. Isa, you want to share about that? Can you hear me? So we have Ashura completing. She's saying that persons with disabilities had higher risk from coronavirus. Many persons with disabilities do have specific underlying conditions that make the disease more dangerous for them. All right. Ashura, maybe you want to take the floor and share about what the group has discussed today. Okay, no problem. So we'll figure it out. I think, Cathy, everyone is back. Not everyone. We are still missing room 2 and some facilitators.
Okay, so I'm passing back to Suleiman.
Perfect.
So over to you, Suleiman.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Christian. Cathy, welcome back from the break group to the breakout group. I think the groups, group 1 from on drought, Can you please tell us what your barriers, the three of the barriers you have, like you're facing, before then the Cameroon groups will need to type in the chat box your names. So we need to know your names, and please tell us 3 barriers that you have discussed on drought. Hello, can you hear me, Frederick? Hello, Frederick.
Yes, this is Frederick. Frederick. Yes, the barriers that we have discussed on drought is we usually lack water. It is a barrier to persons with disabilities because they may not be able to
Maybe could we, if people, if it's
distant sources, and then during this drought, we also have hunger. We also have ill health. There's, hello, hello, hello.
Yes, so please carry on. So you talk about hunger and you talk about ill health. What else
Yes.
are the barriers?
Yeah, we lack of potable water during the drought period. And then we also have economic activities like agricultural activities that come to a halt during the drought because there's no water, no rain. The agri activities come to a halt, the crops dry, the animals also lack grass to eat. We're talking about the cows, we're talking about the fish, we're also talking about the pigs.
Thank you very much.
Animal husbandry comes drought period. Then with poverty, there's poverty during the drought period. Hello? Can I continue?
Yes, you can go on. Go on.
Yeah, we have, during this period, you have high market prices, which affects persons with disabilities. And we also have extreme cold climate and extreme heat during this period, as well as high cost of transportation. It's not quite easy for persons with disabilities to travel during this period. Thank you. We have, you may like to write the names. We have Mr. Tingley Frederick. Tingley Frederick. We have Euphemia Fobesin. We have Mr. Mana Celestine. We have Madame Wasu Victorine. And then you have Dr. Chia Samuel Kwanga. Wow. Then we have the last person is Mr. Ba Idrisu. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Please, I think it would be more better to type the names in the chat box so that others can also, because some people couldn't hear because of the network. But thank you very much. Then the next group is group 3. What's that? On armed conflict. The next group, group 3, on armed conflict. Group 3, please, can you come in? Hello, can anybody hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you, Suleiman, perfectly. So don't be shy. The group that did armed conflict, is that Melik? Was that Meliku?
Yeah, Godfrey, can you present what we have discussed? Godfrey was selected to be a presenter. That's why.
Thank you, Meleko. Sorry for that. No, when we are grouping, I had an internet connection, so I could not actually recognize my group. But what we discussed as group 3, of course, we find one of the barriers that most of the time the data concerning persons with disabilities is not accurate. So it is very hard for people working in humanitarian or the evacuators to easily identify where persons with disabilities are. So you'll find it's a very big barrier, and I think it needs a lot of effort to ensure that whenever there's in any place, the leaders around should be knowing how many people with disabilities are living in that area, so that it is very easy for like if any crisis happens, the humanitarian, the evacuators are able to access these people. Then number 2, we find that the accessibility, there's inaccessibility sometimes when it comes to times of emergencies. You'll find that people are taken to places that are not accessible to persons with disabilities. So a person with disability will say, I rather die where I am than going to a place that is going to be that is going to add more vulnerability to me. So it is a very big barrier, and actually it needs to be worked upon. Even like sometimes women with disabilities face a challenge, like you are taken to a place, there is no materials that you can use during the menstrual periods. So you find it like people will decide to either die from the places or whether there is disaster or whichever, and they want to stay where they are because they are fearing that they are going to places which are not accessible to them. Then we also find that the humanitarian people sometimes are not very well equipped with the knowledge on how to handle persons with disabilities. So we find it like it is also advisable to have like enough trainings to the emergency teams within our localities. That is what we had as group 3. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, group 3, for your useful examples and also the barriers that you highlighted. Then we have the group 4 on pandemic. Please come in, group 4.
So I think we had 2 shy people in the group 4. So they left some messages in the chat box and I will read it out for you. So we had John Chandinga sharing that in case of hazard like COVID-19, persons with disabilities are more vulnerable in the sense that some need personal support, PA, which become difficult in terms of keeping distance. Some may not have access to washing facilities, access to information and resources to buy protection equipment. We had also Ashura adding that persons with disabilities experienced low quality or inaccessible healthcare services than others, that they had higher risk from coronavirus. Many persons with disabilities do have specific underlying conditions that make the disease more dangerous for them. And we had Mohamed Issa sharing that people with disabilities are facing isolation and exclusion as social support services and networks, including personal assistants like caregivers, are disrupted. They may have difficulties carrying out daily activities such as showering and using the restroom without assistance. So I think I covered everything from the group 4.
All right, thank you very much, Stacy, for your support in explaining this. All of you have done really amazingly and giving the list of barriers and the examples. So in order not to waste much time, can we move to the next slide? Christian, please, can you help me move to the next slide?
Yes, we're now on the first slide, for one of 3 on the barriers summary.
Barriers faced by persons with disabilities. The first one is being left behind when populations flee. You see, due to physical barriers to accessing information about asylum processes, attitudinal barriers, in particular for underrepresented groups, and institutional barriers, example, not allowing male assistants to cross borders. We also have the obstacles to evacuation. Some barriers may include lack of accessible early warning systems. For example, the deaf people, they can't hear any alarm or any sound during times like this, and they won't be able to access the early warning systems, and also not including assistive devices in evacuation. Inaccessible information also about the evacuation processes, or easy to read text or braille for the blind, or pictures and images. We also have the barriers to access safe shelter, inaccessible routes to reach shelters, inaccessible shelter, barriers to access information about shelter assistance. For example, the rent assistance for refugees or the IDPs hosted outside of camps. Please, the next slide.
Okay, next slide.
Also, the second barrier, we have difficulty moving among camp or out of camp areas due to not having a landscape, lack of accessible transportation, then resulting in difficulty accessing humanitarian assistance and in exclusion from community participation. The next one is we also have inaccessible information about humanitarian assistance and barriers to communicate with humanitarian actors. So another one is the high level of stigma, resulting in persons with disability being excluded from participating in decision-making on humanitarian response and being isolated. So Stacy, please, to the next slide. Now,
sorry, I'm jumping. Yes, we're on the last slide of the barriers.
Okay, now we have inappropriational risk of violence, exploitation, and abuse due to disrupted social networks, barriers to accessing services, including protection services, hospitals, schools, and also high levels of stigma, communication barriers to reporting abuse. And next, we also have lack of access to basic assistance, involving food assistance, safe shelter, water, sanitation, nutrition, health, education, and protection. Also, we have another barrier, obstacle to participating in decision-making processes, resulting in restricted opportunities to influence the humanitarian response. So the next, we you can also see that all these barriers, most of these barriers, some of you would have highlights on, like you would have highlighted it in your groups, and I can tell you that in true thinking, most importantly, we need this flawed. A lot of people are running away, and how do your governments make resources how do your governments make recommendations and resources or assistance through the international interference by different humanitarian actors within each countries? It depends on how your governments and actors in humanitarian can present themselves to the governments. The Red Cross team, the first aid, and different others. We have a lot of them. We also have within the country that have these problems, we also have the good policy that includes persons with disability through the disabled, that is the OPDs. And we also hope that this training will go a long way in helping you all to understand and see the gap, the type of barriers, how you can define your work papers in your advocacy. In rounding it up, please, Kathy, I will hand over to the next facilitator, Christian, on international legal framework. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Suleiman, and thank you all. We just decided, Suleiman, that we should give everyone their 10-minute break now. So you have exactly 10 minutes to have a little break. Please don't go away. We'll move the slide to the next slide just to be ready for you coming back. Oh, there isn't so we're going to be looking at legal instruments and policy framework when we come back after the break. So just have a 10-minute break. Don't go away. Just put your camera off, put your microphone off. Don't leave the room. You can go and have a quick drink, go to the bathroom, stretch your legs. But in 10 minutes, please be ready to come back. And Crystal's going to take us through what are the key legal instruments that can support you as OPDs to really claim your rights in different types of hazards and crises. Thank you. Thank you, Suleiman. Thank you all.
I think you're Crystal that we...
Yes.
Yes. No, I was just checking that everybody's there.
Yes.
Join back. For the new people who joined just now, we had a sensory break and we will be starting back the session now.
Also, as we prepare to start the session, I wish that everyone can just say hi or maybe write on the chat box to know that everybody is present.
Yes, thank you so much. I think perhaps in the interest of time, we can go ahead. So for newcomers, if you can type in the chat where you are from. Let me just put on my camera just for a second. Hope that the bandwidth will be able to manage that to say hello to the new participants. So my name is Crystal Juilo. I work for the United Nations Children's Fund for UNICEF. We have a regional office for Eastern and Southern Africa that is based in Nairobi in Kenya. And I work on disability inclusion. So UNICEF has disability inclusion development programming in the 21 countries in this region. And of course, we also work on disability inclusion in humanitarian action. Nice to meet everyone. Let me turn off my camera now. And just to confirm that everyone can hear me and can see the slides.
Yes, that's perfect, Crystal.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so I have the difficult task of going through something that's it's quite difficult to do in a very interesting way. So we're going to talk about legal frameworks, policy frameworks, and we're starting off with international law. Maybe if we take a quick step back before we delve into the different bodies of law. Why are we talking about international law? Why is international law important to know? So I myself have also worked previously for an umbrella organization of persons with disabilities. And we did capacity building on the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities when it was ratified. And I could really see the difference when we had built the capacity of the local organizations on how to use international law, because it does give you an extra layer of legitimacy in your advocacy. So international law is important to know because it sets international standards for states to put into national law and to implement. And the purpose of the regulations that are international, it is basically to promote prosperity, peace, justice, and to influence the national laws and practices. And one commonality, unfortunately, about international treaties, conventions, international law in general is that it is quite vague. When you read, for example, the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, you read the different articles, there is quite a lot of room for interpretation there, right? And unfortunately, this is how most of the international treaties are drafted. They are the obligations of states are usually quite vague because they are a compromise. So it is for us working in the field, for you as the organizations of persons with disabilities to interpret the articles as they are and use them in a way as you see fit in your advocacy. So we are going to go first through looking at international human rights law. I'm going to try to move the slide. There we go. I'm just putting up all the bullet points since we are quite out of time. So if you'd like to have a bit of more of an interaction, then you can please type in the chat if you have any ideas of what human rights violations mean, if you experienced any human rights violations, or if you know of anyone who has experienced those. It would be interesting to know what you consider as human rights violations. So, for example, me growing up in the Soviet Union, my parents, my grandparents, they didn't have freedom of movement, freedom of expression. So they had some of their human rights violated. Human rights, they are universal. They are apply in all situations, every place, for everyone, and regardless of gender, disability, or any status. And they provide rights for us as citizens. But of course, for us to have rights, somebody needs to also to have duties. So it is the states, the governments who have duties. and the duties, they differ. So usually when we talk about human rights law, we divide human rights into two categories. We have civil and political rights, which would be, as I mentioned, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, right to life. And then on the other side, we have socio-economic rights, like right to employment, right to adequate standard of living, right to social protection. So states, their obligations are more immediate when it comes to civil and political rights, as opposed to the socio-economic rights. So right to employment, for example, that is something that states need to work on progressively. So that's one important distinction to know in human rights. Human rights, they are also interdependent and interrelated. So when I say that, what I mean is that we cannot have one without the other, right? So we can't have a right to life without having a right to food, or we can have right to freedom of expression without access to education. So all the human rights, they are related to each other and they affect each other, and we have the right to all of them. States cannot choose and say that you will only have socioeconomic rights. We will not give you the right to freely express your opinions. There are many different human rights conventions, and I think the most important for us in this context is to know of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So that is the newest human rights convention, the most modern. All the human rights are included in this convention, so please read it from beginning to end. It doesn't give any new rights really from all the existing human rights conventions that we have, but it does explain better the obligations of states towards persons with disabilities. So it does have an added value in that sense. Let me move to the next slide and try to speed up a bit. So for international humanitarian law, if you have any examples you want to share here of violations of humanitarian law, that would be also good to have some discussion in the chat at least. I see that there is one example there of being denied food. Yes, being denied food can be a human rights violation for sure. So humanitarian law. Humanitarian law, as compared to human rights law, which applies in all the time in any context. Humanitarian law applies only in a situation of armed conflict. And this is quite defined in the body of humanitarian law that we have. What is an armed conflict? What's an international armed conflict? What is a non-international armed conflict? But for humanitarian law to apply, there needs to be an armed conflict. So this regulates the actions of warring parties, combatants. There are, of course, many regulations protecting civilians, the wounded, prohibiting torture, pillaging, prohibiting recruiting children to armed forces, attacks on civilians or civilian targets like hospitals, schools. And I was just looking up this morning that there are no recognized international conflicts on this continent, but there are more than 35 non-international armed conflicts. So these are conflicts where we have either between the state and a non-governmental armed group, or between different non-governmental armed groups on a state territory. So I saw a mention in the chat, the conflict in Ethiopia, Nigeria was mentioned. These are all recognized as non-international armed conflicts. But I don't think the distinction really is that important anymore. So the old conventions that we have from the end of the Second World War, most of the regulations that we have that regulate the different actions that parties can take and that protect civilians, most of them are now considered as customary law, so applying in any situation of armed conflict, really. And here I also want to mention that, yes, we have these regulations, of course, and they are often not upheld as unfortunately not human rights norms either. But we do have regulations that provide individual responsibility for those who commit war crimes or crimes against humanity or genocide. Last on the slides, there is a link to a UN Security Council resolution. So these are legally binding. It's a resolution from the Security Council on protection of persons with disabilities in armed conflict. So this resolution recognizes that persons with disabilities are at increased risk, ensures their protection, access to humanitarian aid, and elaborates on states' obligation to address the specific needs that persons with disabilities have in a situation of armed conflict. Let me move to the next slide. Okay, so now we're looking at international refugee law. So if you want to pop in the chats, if you have any good definitions you want to share on who you consider as a refugee. So for example, when we were moving from right after the collapse of the Soviet Union to Finland, we were not considered as refugees. We were migrants because we were not fleeing persecution. So the Refugee Convention has a definition of who is considered a refugee. So it's a person who has a well-founded fear of persecution, and they are fleeing their country of origin because they're persecuted either because of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So what do we mean by persecution? Generally, persecution refers to the threat to life or freedom or very serious human rights violations. And what is unfortunate is that states are really constantly seeking to limit their obligations to take in refugees and to limit the understanding of what does persecution mean, what does, for example, belonging to a particular social group mean? Does it mean that persons who are LGBTIQ who are fleeing persecution, will they be considered refugees? This is constantly a debate. I remember when I was studying refugee law, we were looking through cases where persons with HIV, they were being sent back to their countries of origin, even though they wouldn't have any access to treatment there, which would be a threat to their life, right? So at least important to be aware. We have the Refugee Convention that defines who refugees are, safeguards the right to seek asylum. And then, of course, it is up to states to interpret what their obligations are under this convention. All right, moving to a slide that we have on the Sendai framework. Let me just quickly go through this, as I see I'm really running out of time. There is a framework in place, a 15-year kind of action plan that governments have agreed on to work towards minimizing the risks that disasters have on livelihoods and well-being of citizens. And it does mention persons with disabilities quite extensively. There are lots of obligations for states, and one of them is to empower persons with disabilities and their organizations to lead in response and recovery. So in designing of plans, implementation of plans, governments have to actually engage with persons with disabilities. That is agreed in this framework. Okay, I think this is the last slide before we come to the summary. Thank you for bearing with me. So in addition to international law, we also have regional treaties and we have national law, right? Regional treaties of relevance. We have the African Charter on persons with African Charter on the rights of people. African Charter on human rights of persons and people. Okay, I probably am not getting the title right. There is a human rights a treaty adopted by the African Union, and there's also a protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities, which is not yet in force. It's good to be aware of this, but they don't really offer any additional rights or additional obligations states. They are more, adaptations of wording to adapt more to this context. Okay, I'm going to wrap up now. So, as mentioned, we have our human rights, which apply at all times, everywhere, to all people. And humanitarian law comes in when we have a situation of armed conflict. But both bodies of law, they protect the rights of civilians. And then we have regulations around refugees, aiming at the countries who are receiving refugees. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's I think it's important for you working and advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities to be aware of what exactly these international regulations say. Read through them and familiarize yourselves with them. And then have a look at the the national laws and policies that you work on and see if there are gaps there, because you can use the legitimacy behind the international norms to hold states accountable. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Crystal. Shall I just jump in now, Kathy, or would you like anyone else to do summary before I start talking? This is Gordon speaking.
Gordon, I think it's fine for you to go ahead. And there was just one comment in, people put a comment that not everybody, Godfrey, I think said, often people with different disabilities don't understand these legal frameworks, and it's very true. And Meliku also said it's the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights. So just clarifying on the language for us. Thank you, Meliku. And the main thing is that sometimes use the plain language version of the CRPD and easy read versions can be really helpful to know. And at the minimum, know that Article 11 of the CRPD holds states accountable to persons with disabilities in any type of hazard or crisis or emergency. So even if you don't know the whole detail, know that you can refer to Article 11 of the CRPD. And I think most OPDs at least know this. And Mohammed finally put a comment as well. IHL requires parties to armed conflicts to afford special respect and protection to people with disabilities and help to ensure their inclusion in all situations. And absolutely, Mohammed, that's also the UN Security Council 2475, which it was only a few years ago that was passed, and that also really strengthens. All of these things are strengthening law, the respect and equality that exists, and it just defines and it helps to hold governments more specifically accountable. But thank you for that, Crystal. And I think there's nothing else in the chat box, so over to you, Gordon.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and yes, thank you, Crystal, for that really important information about the legal frameworks that are behind the work that we're doing and that can support the work that we're doing moving forward. So I want to talk first of all, my name is Gordon Rattray. For the people who joined after the introductions, my name is Gordon Rattray. I work for European Disability Forum. I'm working as a program coordinator on our response to the Ukraine war. And I've been working in the field of humanitarian action in different ways for several years now. So I want to just talk now. You've heard from Crystal about some of the legal policies and frameworks that are behind the work that we do, that can support the work that we do. In order to put these human rights, to realize these human rights and to put these frameworks into action, one of the most important tools that we need is guidelines. We need to have guidelines to show states, organizations that are working on humanitarian action, how they should make these rights come real. And the most recent, most important, most relevant guidelines that we have is called the IASC guidelines. IASC stands for Interagency Standing Committee. This is a mechanism from the United Nations. You don't need to know the details behind this, but basically it's a set of guidelines which have been produced at international level And the most important thing, in my opinion anyway, for us to remember about these guidelines at this point is that they were produced with the collaboration of organizations of persons with disabilities, so OPDs, DPOs, however you want to call us. We were involved from the beginning in advocating for the production of the guidelines and in the development of the guidelines. So really it's something that we've been very much participating in. The guidelines were adopted in published in, I think, 2019, as a result of the first humanitarian summit, which happened in 2016 in Turkey, in Istanbul. So in Istanbul in 2016, one of the outcomes was that there should be a standard set of guidelines at international level to tell agencies and governments how to include people with disabilities in humanitarian action, how to make Article 11 of the CRPD come to life. And we have these guidelines. The slide that's showing now gives an overview of how the guidelines are structured. So let me just briefly talk about this. It's logical. The guidelines start with introductory chapters, talking about the legal and policy framework, which Crystal has just explained, the principles that are behind the guidelines. So, for example, the principles of the CRPD, the humanitarian principles, basically all human rights principles are what is underneath the guidelines. And then it gives cross-cutting topics and programming information, and also makes it clear which type of agencies are responsible for doing what in this work. The guidelines then go on to give clear guidance on how people or organizations working in the different sectors of humanitarian action, so whether it's working in water, sanitation, hygiene, whether it's working in food distribution or in shelter provision, so making sure that people have got a roof over their heads, whatever sector it is, the guidelines give some clear ideas of how those people should be working. And then the guidelines finish at the end with annexes, which give much more details on specific things. So for example, what does reasonable accommodation mean in the context of humanitarian action? So when there is a war, when there is a crisis, what does it really mean to provide reasonable accommodation for people with disabilities? How can organizations ensure that data disaggregation is done, including and counting people with disabilities? And as a reminder, what I said in the beginning, there's a lot of details here, but for me, one of the most important things to remember is that the guidelines were produced in collaboration with OPDs, DPOs, and as a result, it's not only the governments and the humanitarian agencies who are responsible for the implementation of the guidelines, but we as OPDs also we have a responsibility here, an obligation to ensure that that we are involved and that we're part of the implementation process. So that's what we'll talk about in a minute. Before we go to the next slide, I want to make sure, I've not heard from anyone in the chat and I don't see any hands raised. I want to see if anyone has ideas of some of the essential things that the guidelines would include. So what do you see? Just anyone can put their hand up or they can put a message in the chat. If you were making guidelines to include people with disabilities in humanitarian action, what would you say are some of the most essential things that we have to include? I'll stop talking for a minute and see if anyone wants to put something in the chat or put their hand up before we go to the next slide. Stacey mentioned earlier that some people are shy. I can't believe that. Okay, maybe you are. No worries. So let me then go to the next slide. So the guidelines, when we go to the into the section that talks about practical implementation of the guidelines, there are 4 categories of things that must be done by humanitarian agencies. Godfrey, you said reasonable accommodation. Absolutely. Yeah, this is an obligation for sure. What they have done in developing the guidelines, they've divided all of the things that organizations must do into 4 categories. And they have said throughout the guidelines that these 4 obligations, these 4 must-dos, are applicable at all stages of the humanitarian response and across all sectors. So whether or not you're working in shelter or food distribution, and whether or not you are working in the very beginning after a crisis has happened and you're just doing a needs assessment, or whether you are doing a monitoring and evaluation activity towards the end of a project, it doesn't matter. These are the 4 must-dos that you must always incorporate in your work. And I see Godfrey is also mentioning accessible environment. Absolutely. So reasonable accommodation and accessibility go together as 2 of the most important things to take into account, practically speaking. So let me go through the 4 points that they have divided these must-dos into. The first one is meaningful participation. So this means making sure that our organizations of people with disabilities, are participating in everything that affects us. And this is in line with CRPD Article 4.3. It's number 1, it's the most important thing. Number 2 is removal of barriers. You heard earlier, and you spoke earlier about the barriers that people with disabilities face in these contexts. So number 2 is about removing barriers. Number 3 is empowering people with disabilities to support us to develop our strength. So basically it's about strengthening the disability movement to be able to participate. There's no point, if I can talk about points 1 and 3, there's no point opening the door and saying we allow meaningful participation of persons with disabilities if the disability movement doesn't have the resources and the capacity to participate. So 1 and 3 maybe go together this way. So number 3 is about empowering the disability community, strengthening the disability community to be able to participate. And number 4 is data disaggregation. We hear this all the time. There's no point gathering information about an affected population if you don't really know about people that are most excluded, which often include persons with disabilities. So data gathered about a population affected, about a population that you're working on, must include people with disabilities. Okay, do we have time for maybe splitting into groups, or you think we don't have time for this? I'm maybe asking for guidance here from Kathy and Stacey, if we would split into 2 groups and have a quick brainstorm on some practical points.
I think we could. Yeah. So I think the group work really is getting the OPD to think about what they have to do to make this happen, isn't it?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep. So
exactly.
If you're happy with
so
that, I would just give it like 5 or 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good.
So this is perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the next
Same
thing for
groups
us
as last time. I was going to say good and to make it easier.
Okay. So I'm hoping everyone is with me. I see inclusive budgeting coming in the chat. For me, this is absolutely crucial. You cannot do anything without money. So yes, and this would be one of the first things that's got to come in from the beginning, is to make sure that budget is there for inclusion. But what I would like to do is to turn the thing a little bit on its head. We've spoken now about the 4 must-dos. And what we always do as the disability community is tell our governments and the other agencies what they should be doing. But remember, I said earlier that these guidelines are developed also by and for us, and we should be participating in them. I would like you to spend, let's say, 7 minutes. Is that good, Stacey? Can you make a group for 7 minutes and to think about what it is that you, as organizations of persons with disabilities, should be doing. So not so much what your governments or the other agencies should be doing, but what you can bring to the table. What skills and knowledge do you have that might be unique, that others don't have, that you can bring to the discussion, and you can use to make these, to implement these guidelines. Is the question clear? I think you can skip to the next slide, Crystal. Okay, no, go back. Yeah, go back. Yeah, this one, this is good. Yeah. So what strengths do you have as OPDs to support the humanitarian actors? This is really the question. And I would ask you to go for, let's say, 7 minutes and come back and just say one thing from each group that you think you can bring as DPOs, as OPDs to this conversation. If anyone has questions, if you're not sure, put it in the chat. Otherwise, I would ask Stacey to split us into groups, and we come back in 7 minutes and have a very quick round and hear from each group.
Yeah, so the breakout rooms are ready. Please, the persons who require accessibility, such as sign language or captions, will remain in the main room.
Thanks, Stacey.
Hi everyone, this is Stacey speaking. So in this room we have Chandiga John, Eric Makarakiza, Gizachu that just joined, Patrick Egesa, and Timothy Adejumo. So I will let you respond to the question that was asked by Gordon about the 4 must do, which is what strengths do you have as OPDs to support humanitarian actors, and like what practical what practical things you would like to share about that. Please feel free to take the floor. Don't wait for me. You can also use the chat box if needed. I will read it on your behalf if it is more comfortable. Yes, Eric, you want to say something? Please open your mic and don't raise your hand. If this is like breakout room, so it's totally for you to open the mic and take the floor about this topic.
With a disability, I think that's then looking to then with the inclusion of the people with a disability in our country, Burundi. I see that then there is about the isolation of with people with a disability, isolation in work, in education, in all activities, there is isolation. But with a convention, or with the World Convention about the people who has a disability, and the country has signed, but practically, if we look how then they include such people who has a disability, I see that then there is something to have to do what, to pledge, then to work for them, to work for them, to work for them. We have to help them, because you see then with a number of people who has a diploma, who don't who are hide, then with the international handicap. Then now in Burundi there is no organization, no international. Then there is the handicap, international handicap, which helped the people with disability to know, then to be to know them. If you come in our country, you can't know the number with the people with a disability. We can't know the people who has the children who has a disability, and the number of disability of children, the disability of youth with a diploma. Then you see, then we have to do many things for them. We have, but I know that then people who has a disability, they are able. I know that they are able. They can do many things. They can work as others. Then you see, we have to work hard for them. They have to know their laws, the laws of them. They don't. Then in our country, in Africa, I see that then the people with a disability, they don't know the rights of them. You see, then now in our country, this then a problem to help them, to try then to advocate for them. We have to advocate to the to the government for them. You see,
Okay.
then what then is in our country, Burundi. Thank you very much for this then topic which we discuss about. God bless.
Thank you, Eric. Is there anyone else who would like to share something?
Yes.
Patrick.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me properly?
We can hear you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. I was trying to follow very well, and the one challenge we are facing, for example, the convention has have been ratified in Uganda, and but the challenge is that it is not being implemented, and the persons with disabilities are supposed, for example, to be employed. And this is also in the law. But the companies in Uganda, for example, do not employ persons with disabilities because probably due to extra costs, which are related to employment of persons with disabilities. I will give you an example also that, for example, we have social protection, and which services persons with disabilities are supposed to get. The challenge is that
hello.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think people are coming back to the main room, so I'm sorry to interrupt whomever was speaking. Whoever was speaking. What was it, Patrick or Eric?
Is it okay?
Yeah, we're coming back. We're coming back to the main room. So we need to ask you to finish your discussions. I'm sorry, we're running short of time.
Yes. I'm just finishing with one point. And the biggest problem is that there's no data disaggregation. And when they talk about persons with disabilities, some may think that everybody is of one category of disability. For example, the deaf. Yet we have the handicapped, we have the hard of hearing, we have people with several persons with disabilities, and is affecting us. I will stop there for the moment, then I will come back later. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
And please, sorry, please, the rest of the group, feel free to share in the chat if you could not share your opinion about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So this is Gordon speaking again. We are running a little bit short of time. I hope you had, in your short time in your groups, I hope you had some good discussions. The purpose was to think about what you as organizations of persons with disabilities can do, what skills, what knowledge, what capacity you have that you can do to implement the IASK guidelines, and specifically around the four must-do actions, so participation, removal of barriers, disaggregation of data, and empowering the disability movement. So let me ask, I think because we're short of time, I'll just ask for one point from each group. The first group, I think we had Godfrey and Annette and others together in one room. So can I ask, is there someone from the room that had Godfrey and Annette would like to say just one thing that you think that OPDs, DPOs can bring to this discussion? And if you don't want to open the microphone and speak, you could put the information into the chat box.
Hello, I can speak.
Yes, please, go ahead. It's Godfrey.
This is Annette.
Annette, go ahead, Annette.
Yeah, we said we are the owners of our challenges. So the other thing we could provide is a psychosocial support to the people who are being affected during humanitarian.
Very good, Annette. Absolutely. I like what you said at the beginning, that we are the owners of our challenges. So we know better than anyone the barriers and the challenges we face. I think this is a very good point. And yes, psychosocial support is one of the things that that we could provide, or at least in collaboration with others, we could help others to provide effective psychosocial support. Thank you very much. John Chandiga, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Coordinating service delivery, even monitoring the services that are provided to person with disability, and then providing access to information about the service available.
Thank you very much, John. I think those are very good points. Yes, you basically said that OPDs can be involved in coordinating, monitoring, and service delivery. So I could read into that we could be involved in pretty much any of the activities. We have the capacity to be involved in any of the activities. Thank you very much. I'm aware of time. I see Ishiyaku, you have your hand up. Are you from the same room as Annette and Godfrey? Ishiyaku, go ahead. Adamu.
Okay, thank you. I think another point raised during our discussion is that OPDs can engage in policy development and also try to understand the document we are talking about. They should also guide other actors within the field of humanitarian to be able to implement it very well. Thank you.
Perfect. I agree completely. Thank you so much. Yes, policy development and implementation of the guidelines. Okay, what about the room from Cameroon? Would someone like to speak on behalf of the room from Cameroon? Do you have one thing that you have thought about? No news from Cameroon. It can be that one of the previous two speakers were from Cameroon and I'm not aware of it. So while Cameroon discuss who would speak, let me see who from the main room. I think when we joined Eric was speaking, or was it Patrick was speaking? Would one of you like to summarize something from the main room?
We have a few
Yes.
things in the chat box as well, Gordon.
Ah, I'm missing that. Okay. Someone said yes. Was that Patrick?
Yes, I'm Patrick.
Go ahead, Patrick, and I will look at the quick chat.
I would
Yeah.
like just to say that inclusiveness without us means that we are excluded. And the equity without diversity just means that we are not part of the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And now I'm seeing the chat messages. Sorry, I missed them. So John Chandiga had said that it is important to work together with humanitarian actors in mobilization of persons with disabilities, in awareness raising and training of actors, and access to information, referrals, training on sign language, and monitoring. So yeah, very good points. Crystal mentioned that UNICEF Mozambique has worked closely with the OPD FAMOD in connection with the community to help map where persons with disabilities are. So yes, organizations of persons with disabilities know where people live and are quickest to identify people. And Patrick has added that we can be unified under one body that can speak for us all. And provide data to the government that is that the government needs. So very good points. Have I missed anyone? Is there anyone from Cameroon who would like to speak? I don't see any more hands raised or points included, but I think we've identified some of the key points. And I'll just to summarize and close the session, considering the lack of time. The guidelines, the IASC guidelines, are there to guide governments, humanitarian actors, UN agencies, donors, whoever it is, on how to make sure that Article 11 of the CRPD is implemented, how it comes to life. And the guidelines are organized, constructed in a way that is logical and easy to follow for anyone, depending on, irrelevant of which part of the humanitarian field that you're working in. But there are four main must-dos that are highlighted for all of these fields of work. One is participation, one is removal of barriers, one is disaggregation of data, and one is empowering persons with disabilities, so strengthening the disability movement. And these 4 points, it's important to remember that not only states, governments, humanitarian agencies are responsible for addressing these 4 points, but we as organizations of persons with disabilities are also obliged to become involved. So it's essential that we learn about the guidelines, we identify what we can do, where our strengths are, where we want to be involved, where it is relevant in our context, geographical context, or what capacities we have, and see where we can be part of this discussion moving forward. With that, I think I will finish and pass on to Maud, who is going to close the session. I hope if there's any questions, you can contact me. You can share email addresses at the end. I'm happy to take questions by email as well. So I will stop there and let Maud finish for us.
Thank you so much, Gordon, and thank you, participants, for the wonderful interaction and participation. And indeed, what you have expressed in your various group really resonate with what we are working for. As nothing about us without us is the motto of persons with disabilities. Of course, the participation of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action is crucial in various respects, in coordination, in even technical assistance for ensuring inclusive humanitarian actions, inclusive humanitarian action. is considered by all the actors. Of course, our role is vast enough as organizations of persons with disabilities, and we are supposed to contribute at the regional level, at the national level, and in our various contexts, and even in our regions and states in our own countries. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I would also want you to think about these small assignments as each and every one of you goes home, goes home virtually at least. We want to say that we will give you a small assignment that you need to find out about humanitarian framework. We want to find out about the humanitarian coordination system in your various countries, either at the national level, at the regional level, if you are working at the East African level, West African level, Southern African level. So you can tell us about your country or your region, tell us about the humanitarian coordination system in your country. That is the first point. The second point is that we want you to think about the types of humanitarian crises in your country. What are the common types of crises that occur in your country? As you all have heard, you've all heard about the types of disasters that we have facilitated. You have all understood and you have interacted and participated fully in this process. So we want you to think about the types of disasters that often occur in your context. Also, we want you to find out if you have humanitarian, we want you to find out if you have active humanitarian emergency in your country. For example, if you have an ongoing situation that creates a humanitarian emergency in your country, we want you also to find that out and prepare all that in small notes. In addition to that, also, we want you to find out if there is an emergency in your country, who are the humanitarian actors in your country? We want you also to understand that and see who are the main humanitarian actors who are operating in your country. Also, we want you to find out specifically if you have disability working group in the humanitarian system in your country. If that, because it is crucial that you coordinate and connect with the disability focal person if he or she is there. If there is also an age or a disability focal person, I know in some countries there is this Gen Cap that work on issues of gender and also disability focal persons in various countries. So what you can do. Of course, we have not forgotten those countries that do not have crises in their that do not have active crises in their countries. And if you are part of that, if you are actually in the country where there is no humanitarian crisis, then we want you to tell us what is the emergency preparedness measures that is in place in case emergency occurs, whether it is inclusive or not. So tell us those types, and also if you can, tell us whether it is inclusive or not. Also, you can tell us whether there is national law or policy on what can be done if there is an emergency in your country, both for humanitarian actors, for government, for OPDs. What really can be done if there is a humanitarian emergency in the country? Then what can be done? Then if you can tell us whether there is policy, there is guidance, there is law, you can also let us know, and we'll all discuss that in the next presentation. Now we also have some materials that we want you to read. As you go back also, you look at, we will also share all that in the slides, and you will see some reading guidance so that you look at them and you try to understand more as we prepare for the next session. In our next session, we will be talking about the humanitarian system in depth, and we will also be talking about the humanitarian coordination system in more depth so that you can get prepared. Also, I don't forget also to remind you that we will be sharing the polls as we end this presentation so that you can also have your feedback as to how the sessions went and what do you think that really need to improve and the level of information that you have received. We will be eagerly waiting for your feedback and will be ready to respond to any kind of questions that is related to inclusive humanitarian action. We are available on our emails, and also connect to my colleagues, to any of our colleagues, in case you have any inquiry, any clarification, any kind of point that you really need to understand, because our main objective is to make you understand and enjoy our training. Ladies and gentlemen, participants from the various regions, I really appreciate your time and the time and the knowledge that you have received and what we have also learned from you, because we understand that learning is give and take. So I would like to say thank you so much, and let me take you back to Kathy and Stacy for any kind of information or how we can progress from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Moot. We've just put the Moodometer in for you to do. And we're really sorry that the people that are sharing a screen only get one vote. We feel a little bit guilty because not everybody gets a vote if they're sharing a screen. We're closing now, but we'll be sending a PowerPoint today with everything in. We've put some links in the chat, but they will all be in the PowerPoint, and Stacey will be emailing you that later today, so don't worry. So thank you all. If anyone wants to vote on the Moodometer quickly, we're just about to close the poll. If anyone else wants to vote, and we realize not everybody can access it. Thank you for sharing your emails. And thank you to the sign interpreters and the captioners who've gone a little bit over today in supporting us. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. I'm just going to share the poll results with everyone. So you can see that we're hoping that everybody enjoyed today's sessions. We've got some 10s, 2 10s, 1 9, 2 8s, and 1 6. And as Moat says, please give us feedback, and we look forward to seeing you next time, in 2 weeks' time at the same time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kati. My
Take
mentor.
care.